Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to go over my final prediction for the 2024 presidential election between Democratic candidate Kamala Harris and the Republican candidate, former President Trump. So, long time no see. I haven't been making these election videos very often on my channel for a number of years, but I thought it'd be fun just to quickly go over my final prediction, my map for 2024. There's a lot of conflicting data out there based on the numbers we've been getting in the case that you can make one way or the other on who you think is going to win. But nevertheless, I'm going to start out west, work my way over to the east, and probably spend a little bit more time on the states that are figuring to be a bit more competitive. Starting out on the west coast, of course, we are going to expect Washington to be safe for the Democrats, as well as Oregon and California. Going out further west, of course, Hawaii is also going to be safe for the Democrats. And then Alaska, I expect to go for Trump, and maybe not solidly red, maybe one step below that. However, this one is likely to go in Trump's direction. The reason why I'm not putting this as completely safe, their statewide at-large congressional seat is a Democrat, so Democrats have shown that they can win this state in a statewide election, but Trump did fairly well in Alaska in the prior two election cycles, so you'd expect him to carry it this time as well. Moving over, Idaho is going to be safe for Donald Trump. Now, Montana has an interesting Senate race going on with the incumbent Democrat fighting for his life up there in the state of Montana. That's going to be a closer race on the presidential side where we should expect Trump to win the state relatively safely. Wyoming, no doubt, is going to be safe for Trump, as well as Utah. Now, the voting electorate in Utah maybe isn't quite as pro-Trump as their preferred Republican candidate as you might get in some of these other deeply red states, but nonetheless, you would expect the state, of course, to go to Donald Trump safely. The state of Colorado has seen really solid gains for the Democrats over the past decade plus, and it has gone into that safer category there for the Democrats. We're going to likely see that again this time around, as well as New Mexico being a relatively safe one there for the Democrats. Now moving over to two of what are likely to be more of the competitive states that we'll see out west, Nevada and Arizona. When taking a look at the early voting data, there isn't as big as a gap between the male and female vote in Nevada and Arizona as what we're seeing in a lot of the other battleground states, and that's why I think states that potentially have more of an argument to be made for Trump to win in the battleground as opposed to Harris. Now, Arizona has a weak Republican Senate candidate that's very likely to lose, and perhaps that also has an effect on the presidential side of things, but I'm just going to put this as a tilt Republican in Arizona. Arizona is still a state that I put a little bit to the right of Nevada as a whole, whereas Nevada, I'm just going to put a slight tilt over to the Democrats, and I expect these to be two of the closer state results that we see in this coming election. So now moving into the Great Plains states, North Dakota, very safe for Trump, as well as South Dakota. Now, another interesting Senate race is going on in Nebraska. There's an independent that's polling pretty well against the Republican incumbent. That's one to keep an eye on. And Nebraska is also an interesting state because you can win congressional districts. Now, statewide, I expect this to be safe for Trump. In this one electoral college vote could end up being extremely important depending on how these battleground states play out. But moving another state down to Kansas, this is another state that we would expect to be relatively safe for Trump. However, we did get a very interesting poll out of Iowa recently, the Gold Standard Seltzer Des Moines, Iowa poll that showed Harris ahead by 3 percentage points. This could indicate that Harris is doing better with that rural white vote than what we saw from Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden. And if she is actually making those kind of inroads in a state like Iowa, perhaps she can be a little bit more competitive in states like Kansas and Nebraska as well. But flipping that over into these upper Midwestern states that are going to have a similar rural white vote, that if you get a little bit of a movement there to the Harris side, could make things better for her in states like Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. But continuing to move down here, Oklahoma is going to be safe for Trump. Texas is one of those states that is very intriguing, interesting. I'm going to be putting this one as likely for Trump. There's a general consensus out there that if Texas has more voter turnout, that this can be very beneficial for the Democrats, and maybe it ends up being that way. But I also think the reverse argument can be true here as well, that Texas is a vote historically that doesn't get great voter participation compared to a lot of these other states, and maybe there's a lot of non-voters in the states that would generally lean towards the Republicans anyway, and maybe they're getting more encouraged to come out and vote as well. So just because we're going to get a higher turnout in Texas doesn't necessarily mean it's all going to go towards the Democrats. Maybe it could actually have the reverse impact. Now, there's also an interesting Senate race there as well between Ted Cruz and the challenger Colin Allred, which is something to keep an eye on. But this is where I'm going to have Texas sit for now. Moving over, Louisiana is going to be safe for Trump, as well as Arkansas. Missouri, and a lot of these southeastern states are going to be very safe, solidly red for Trump, like Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, as well as South Carolina. Now, moving down to Florida, this is a state that was always the most talked about competitive state that we saw in the early 2000s, and then moving into when Obama had won it twice. But then things kind of flipped over with Clinton losing it and then Trump doing very well there in 2020. And the state as a whole has been trending more towards the Republicans. Perhaps that comment at the Madison Square Garden rally that was disparaging towards Puerto Ricans can have an effect here with the large block of Puerto Rican voters that are in the state of Florida. But nonetheless, I do see this one as at the very least a lean towards the Republican, maybe even a likely one, but that's where I'm going to set that one. Now, Georgia has been very good for the Democrats in recent election cycles. You had Biden winning it in 2020. Both senators are now Democrats in the state of Georgia, and you would figure that the change in demographics that we're even getting over the past 4 years compared to 2020 should be favorable for the Democrats. I think this is going to be an extremely close one. I'm just going to put it as a slight tilt for Harris. And this is one of those states that I'm going to be keeping my eye on. Now, moving to North Carolina, another one that I expect to be extremely close, and something that I think is going to hurt Donald Trump is the fact that there is such a weak Republican candidate running for governor. On the governor's side, the Democrats should win by double digits in a convincing win there. That could make it more difficult for Trump to carry the state as a result. This one should be extremely close, but I actually do think North Carolina is a slight tilt for Harris. This is a state that Obama had won back in 2008, came up just short in 2012. It has been relatively close in recent election cycles. They have had a Democratic governor for a number of years now, and it looks like that's going to continue to be the case. Out east, the states that I'm going to be keeping an eye on very closely are North Carolina as well as Georgia. Moving up to Virginia, this one is going to be solid for the Democrats, whereas West Virginia is going to be safe for Trump. And then Maryland, safe for Kamala Harris, as well as the District of Columbia, the state of Delaware, as well as New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts, as well as Vermont, New York. New Hampshire should also be pretty safe for the Democrats. However, it was actually pretty close with Clinton and Trump back in 2016, and it is a state that generally is more competitive than what we see in these other northeastern states, so I'm going to put it at one step below safe for the Democrats. Maine, another one of these states like Nebraska that you can win specific districts. The first congressional district is going to be very safe for Harris, as well as statewide should be safe. I actually think the second congressional district is in play. They have a Democratic congressman from the state, so we see that Democrats can win this district. Trump did really well in this one back in 2020, which leads me to believe that he's probably going to take it again this time around. So I'm going to put this one in the likely camp. Now moving into the all-important Rust Belt over here in the Midwest, Illinois is going to be safe for the Democrats, whereas Indiana is going to be safe for the Republicans. Minnesota should be pretty safe for the Democrats. It's a very consistently blue state, and with having Walz on the ticket there on the Democrat side should help them with that one. Iowa, I'm going to put one step below safe because of that Seltzer poll that came out showing Harris ahead of Trump by 3 percentage points. That at least puts Iowa in the conversation as being competitive, given the historic success of that particular poll. But I still need to see the results before I'm totally going to get behind the results from what we saw from that Seltzer Des Moines Register poll and putting that one as likely Trump. Ohio is going to be to the right of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. This used to be a hotly contested battleground state. It has been leaning towards Trump and more positive for the Republicans in recent cycles. I'm going to be putting it as likely towards Trump in that statewide result. And this gets us to the final three states, the most important results that we will see in this election cycle. Most people are expecting Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania to be the deciding factors. I think that these are leans towards Harris. So putting that with Pennsylvania, as well as Michigan and Wisconsin. I think you can even make the argument that Michigan is one step to the left of Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. There's a number of reasons why I see these three states going to Harris, not just because Biden won them back in 2020, but statewide, Democrats have been doing better in these states than we saw back in 2016 when they went to Trump. Each of these states, which are statewide elections, of course, in these areas. And beyond that, if we're seeing a more competitive result in a state like Iowa, that should translate into these upper Midwestern areas. All Harris has to do is slightly better with that rural white vote, and she's likely to be holding strong with those other demographic categories that have been positive for the Democrats, and that can make a big difference. An additional piece of data that I want to show you why I'm bullish on Harris's chances in Wisconsin, Michigan, as well as Pennsylvania. If we look at the gender gap in these areas, It's at 56% women voters thus far, early voting, compared to only 43% for men. In Pennsylvania, Michigan, 55% women to 45% men. And then Wisconsin, 50% women to 43% men. If Harris is getting more enthusiasm and turnout from that key voting bloc for her with that women turnout, that's a really good side for the Democrats and Harris's chances at picking up these states. Also, if we move over and take a look at party affiliation in these areas, we can't glean too much out of this because if you compare it back to 2020, there was such a different dynamic going on then with the early vote between the Democrats and Republicans that you can parse this data in different ways to make it look better for one party or the other. But just to show you the numbers, we're at 56% Democrats to 33% Republicans with that early vote in Pennsylvania. Michigan at 46% Democrats to 43% Republicans. And Wisconsin, the largest category there is for others, but then Democrats at 34% and Republicans at 25%. I don't think there's as much meaningful information out of these party affiliations as what we're seeing with the gender difference in the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. But at the end of the day, this is my final map, having 308 electoral votes for Harris, 230 for Donald Trump. Just to show you how close this can potentially be, North Carolina and Georgia. If we were to flip these over to a tilt for Trump, you can see we get down to 276 to 262. And then moving out west to the other tilt I have in Nevada, if this one were to go to a tilt over to Donald Trump, we get to 270 to 268. That's where the congressional district in the state of Nebraska can be so imperative to the Democrats winning this. That would get them over the line in this scenario. And it just goes to show you how important the states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania are to this election cycle. If Harris is picking those up, it's very tough for the Republicans to get over that 270 number because they would need to win all of the other competitive states, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. And then where would they be getting their additional electoral college vote from there to get over 269? They would additionally have to pick up one of these key states as well. But flipping it back to my final map, this is where I'm at, 308 to 230. Please put your comments down in the comment section. Let me know if you agree or disagree. And of course, you can come back after the final results and dunk on me if I'm completely wrong or say, hey, good job if I was somewhat accurate. So I appreciate you guys stopping by. Consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. Who knows, I might make some of these more in the future. We'll see. But I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you back here next time.